it implies either that you've either slept with other women and I'm the smartest, or I'm the smartest because you haven't slept with any other women on the
Right,
train.
right.
It's not like a very flattering thing to say, but it's just a joke. But she's just like, oh, he really loves me.
I finally
Watched.
I finally
Watched.
I
finally
watched. I
finally
watched.
I finally
Watched.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of I Finally Watched. I'm Milan.
And this is David. And today we finally watched North by Northwest.
I was super excited about this because even though this is not really like Alfred Hitchcock's like most famous work, I think like Psycho and Vertigo and Rear Window, all the other ones we've done are definitely like known by everyone.
Birds that we're doing next, too.
Birds too, yeah, but I would even think those other three are more famous than Birds.
Yeah, I would say Birds is probably fourth, right?
Yeah. And I would say out of, all the ones we've seen, this one probably has the best written dialogue, the best action sequences, and the best overall like camera and cinematography work.
I think it feels the most modern to me.
That too. It feels like, and we talked about this a little earlier, like a James Bond that's like ahead of its time.
Yeah, and I think, obviously the novel, I don't know when the novels were written, but I assume slightly before this. And then, this came out in what, 59, and the first James Bond was like Dr. No was just a little bit after this, I believe. So
I was just about to type in
19
James Bond.
it's 1962, so 3 years later. Um
Yeah, but the book is by not James Patterson, which is
Ian
what I was gonna say.
Ian Fleming.
Ian Fleming, that's right. Yeah, in 1953.
Okay, yeah, so yeah, all around the same time. I mean, and there's so many kind of movies like this, like the unintentional spy. Actually, so of like the Pixar movies, the ones I like the least are the Cars movies. But
Oh, you're thinking of Mater.
I like Cars 2 because that's what that movie is, and I actually like that one. I don't like the other two, and I think a lot of people don't like 2, but it has this storyline in it, and it's just kind of funny. Um, so yeah, like if James Bond was like, not didn't know he was James Bond sort of, and I did read somewhere that the part of James Bond was offered to Cary Grant, and then I think James Mason, who plays Van Damme in this. And no,
Wow.
so they're both like sort of considered or both up for it or whatever. James Mason was actually offered it. He didn't take it, and then Cary Grant, I don't think was offered it. But yeah, like it has that feel to it. There's also just like there's like many similarities like as we go in, and there's just also so many things in this movie that you're like, oh, other movies have stolen from, and you don't even know if this is the originator of it, like if it came from writing or earlier movies or whatever. But just so many things that probably then made it into other stuff.
But this is what made this like iconic. Like the crop planes circling and trying to like kill him in the field. Like that's used in so many things. I'm sure the Simpsons have used it. I know Family Guy has used it. Just and it's been parodied and like I know James Bond has used it. Had to have.
Well, something similar, maybe not that exact thing, but
No,
yeah,
no,
like
right, exactly.
um I've not seen every James Bond movie. That's something we probably could do. Like maybe
Ooh, that'd be fun.
like one from each Bond. Although I've seen all the Pierces.
I've seen all the Pierces, I've seen all the Craigs, I think I've seen most of them. Except that one guy that nobody really likes.
Lazenby?
Lazenby.
The other thing, so this movie feels modern, except for in movies today, there's sound, like a score
Good
going
job.
throughout the entire movie. There's some sort of music being played, and that does not happen in this movie. And I actually think like it's maybe overused a lot in movies nowadays, where it's just like there
Well,
constantly feels to need to be something like pushing how the audience is supposed to feel, and instead of like letting the audience just like figure it out
Feel.
on their
Yeah.
own.
I think that's a very, like, Hitchcockian thing to do. Like, in Rear Window when he's, like there's a lot of silent moments in Rear
Yeah.
Window, for sure. Um, and, you have the famous, in Psycho, and Hitchcock is famous for his musical cues, uh like, when he does musical cues, they're really, known to be his. But he is also known to let the silence dwell.
Yeah. And so, that part of it, it makes it feel like a little less modern. And then the way they have to dance around the sex, although they don't dance around it as much as other movies. Um, that's the only real thing. It's not slow at all. It's very fast paced. A lot happens. In Rear Window, it's a lot of just watching. In Vertigo, it's like very like slow scenes. In
Well, it's
this, like
also just a lot of watching. He watches her for a very long period of time.
he does. But it is very, very fast. There's so much that happens in this movie. Like each scene, you're like learning plot details, like very plot dense.
What's occurring to me is did Hitchcock it's a thing, right? That people say that Hitchcock has like a thing for blondes in his movies. Not like his preference, but like in his movies, it's always starring a blonde.
Yeah, I mean, even Vertigo, she's a blonde for most of it. The good
Yeah.
parts.
I'm yeah, I think Burrs it stars a blonde too.
It does. It does.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah,
I think that's what people
who
say. It's like Hitchcock and his blondes.
who can blame? Yeah, it's probably a thing. I don't know. Maybe you should have looked it up before you brought it up.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I'm like 90% sure.
Well,
Um,
I read that he tried to get his first choice for this before Eva Marie Saint was Grace Kelly.
isn't it?
Even
Isn't it everyone's first choice?
even though she was the Princess of Monaco at the time and like was not acting anymore, he tried, and I guess she said no.
Oh, it'd be
Um,
hilarious if she was like, it's like Meghan Markle would be like, yeah, I'll be part of your Lifetime movie.
well, I don't think Lifetime. It'd be more like if she's like, "Yeah, M Night Shyamalan, I'll do one of your movies." I
M.
think that's a
Night
good
Shyamalan. You compare Hitchcock to M. Night Shyamalan
just genre, genre. I feel like,
with the twist.
yeah, this one had a double twist, which
Yeah,
I
this one
like.
was really good.
I saw so I saw that she was going to be a bad guy, and I think in retrospect it's very obvious that she was like also a government agent too.
A
But
double
but
agent.
when it happened, I was like, "Oh shit." And then when they explained like, "Oh, well, she actually isn't an agent. She started dating this guy and then we sort of turned her." Like so it's actually three twists. Um
Well, what's interesting is that she actually got into this spy business a lot like him by accident, right? Like not
yeah.
not the exact way, but both were not like CIA trained to do this, but they got in it, and he kind of like you can really see where the sympathetic, he's in love with her, obviously, but he's really sympathetic to the cause of getting her out was because he knew that like what's that saying? Once you're in, you can't get out. Is that the
Uh-huh.
mob? That's probably the mob.
Yeah, they feel that way.
Yeah. But I mean, yeah, let's start at the beginning. This is a very long movie. It's 2 hours and 15 minutes, so we got a lot to get through.
By the way, so this is one of three like mistaken identity movies, and we didn't do the other ones, but The Wrong Man and then Frenzy. Because it was like, oh, Hitchcock has a thing for doing these type of movies. And I was like, based on what we've seen so far, but yeah, he's actually done.
Oh,
Hitchcock's done a lot of movies.
those yeah. Those he's known for that. Those are movies by him that are off the same like Wrong Man
Genre,
plot.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, a true story of The Wrong Man is a true story that explores the real life consequences of mistaken identity, and Frenzy, a tale of murder and mistaken identity.
Do you know that Henry Cavill movie, Gentlemanly, Ungentlemanly
Warfare,
Warfare?
yeah.
That is heavily based off of um, Ian Fleming's real life.
Huh.
Yeah,
I haven't watched it yet. I have it somewhere in here,
yeah,
somewhere in
it's
some
good.
piles.
It's good. I liked it. Okay, so this movie, like you mentioned, unlike his other films we watched, starts off right away. There's usually like maybe a third of the movie buildup, especially in Psycho. There's a huge buildup, Vertigo, Rear Window. But this movie, they're like, "You're the guy. Come with us." Maybe
Yeah.
not even 5 minutes into the film.
Yeah. So the opening credits, by the way, a lot of people consider it the first like extended use of opening credits like that appearing on the building,
Interesting.
which is really cool looking. This like part of the modern look of it. It reminded me a little bit of the way Fincher did it in Panic Room. Obviously, tons of people have done it, but um, like I don't know, just seeing that as the start of it, I was like, holy shit, like this is gonna be good. Which you already knew it was gonna be good, but
Whenever you mention like a panning, like a like credits like that, I always think of the Speed. It's
it's a
like
good one.
you're inside the elevator shaft going down. It's yeah.
Those are not my favorite, but yeah. And then we see Hitchcock is like, let me get my appearance out of the way, like right in the beginning, trying to get on that bus.
What do you think of Hitchcock's like his cameos? Because they're not like Quentin Tarantino's cameos, where it's not he's not doesn't have a line, and it's very apparent that he's not playing a character. It's just very apparent that he wants to be in it.
He's Stan Lean, you know what I mean? He's
Yeah,
the
but even
OG.
Stan Lee has a line.
That's true. Well, I mean, I think maybe Hitchcock knows his limitations. I don't know.
Hmm.
You know, QT is like, if I'm gonna get in there, I'm gonna either lick some feet or say a slur. You know what I mean? So like,
Yeah.
Hitchcock's like, I don't want to get involved with that. Um,
You think Quentin Tarantino, now that I think about it, is like the purge to him? It's like I'm usually good, but one time every ever so often,
I gotta
I
do
get
some bad shit.
yeah, I
And
get it.
I have to do it in a movie.
Yeah,
Although he didn't do Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, right? He wasn't in that.
I don't think so.
Um, so opens with him talking to his secretary. I love like we get the dialogue right away. They're talking back and forth. You're like, does any of this matter? I like when he steals the cab from the guy and he's like, I made him feel like a good Samaritan. She's like, he knew you were lying. He's like, oh, just some diatribe. Just really like letting you know, like, hey, this is an ad man who's used to bending the truth, so he can sort of fit right into this world, like, pretty easily.
Yeah, and then like that thing about his mother is gonna come up.
So I started watching this. I just was like, oh, I'll just like watch a few minutes of it. And I watched up until he sits down at the table with the guys, and I was like, "Oh, I guess this is where this is going." And then like started it over the next night, and I was like, "Oh, that just had nothing to do with anything. Like nothing, none of that matters. This goes in a completely wild, different direction."
Sorry, boys, this has been bothering me, but my secretary can't get a hold of my mother because she's out of town.
That's a good. There's some good use of plot devices here, right? Like, and I like the setup of this where he's like, "Oh, let me talk to this Telegram guy or whatever," as the guy's asking for Kaplan, and then like, "Oh, that's fucking Kaplan." It's really smart. And then he gets
But
kidnapped.
why do they think it's him? We never get an explanation of that, right?
The guy is going around like Kaplan. I'm looking for Kaplan, and he raises his hand to talk to the guy. So they're like, he's Kaplan because he raised his hand to talk to that specific
Oh, it was
guy.
just a coincidence.
Yeah, the whole thing started off just bad luck.
And that's where it all starts off. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because I was just like, well, maybe they just knew he was there because George Kaplan, whoever he is, had like a whole agenda already laid out in front of them, right? So then, oh, maybe they were just looking for a guy who vaguely matched his description. I One of my favorite things, and it's such a point that's honed in on through the movie, is that when Van Damme finally meets Thornhill for the first time, and he goes, "Oh, I thought you'd be shorter, smaller." And then that whole thing is ran through because he gets into quote unquote George Kaplan's hotel room and tries quote unquote George Kaplan's suit, and the suit's even smaller, right? It doesn't
Yeah,
fit him. And it just really keeps going. It's like they really, the CIA, FBI, it's all part of the same alphabet soup, you know what I mean?
right.
Um, they really made this George Kaplan guy a person without ever existing.
Yep. And it's a little bit based on like World War II history. Like I forget which country it was, but they were trying to convince like I think the Germans and the Italians that like, oh, they were going to attack in a certain place, so they used a cadaver with some notes so it would be found, and then they could attack a different spot. Um,
That's interesting.
yeah. So kidnap him. They won't say anything to him. Take him to this mansion, and it's just very funny that he's like, if it's almost if he just admits to the lie that he's like, oh, we'll let you go, which is probably not true. But he's like, I don't even know what you're talking about to admit to anything. You know what I mean? I don't know enough to. And he just, the more he says, the more he's like, well, you're just a spy. Like, you, of course, you're not going to tell me. And to the point where he's like, well, I guess I have to kill you.
Yeah.
And I don't think I've seen, this is such a uniquely done scene, especially for an older movie, them pouring the alcohol down his throat. And then the next scene cuts to at night, putting him in a car, which you find out later was a stolen car. They even thought about that. Put him in this stolen car, and then you see him driving drunk. And as he's driving, I was like, I don't know, was this even illegal in the 50s? Weren't you allowed to drive drunk like that long ago? Like,
I had a story to tell you a couple of weeks ago when I was in Mexico. No, I was in the DR, and there was this really cool building. Like it was all set up restaurant type thing. And I was with someone, and I asked them, I said, "What is that? That's such a cool building." She goes, "Oh, that's a car wash. And when people are waiting to get their car washed, they go upstairs, and that's a bar." And I'm like, "Oh my god, that's a genius idea. Why don't we have that in the US?" I'm like, "That's so good." And she looked at me and she goes, "Because it's illegal." And I'm like, "Oh, right. I'm like, "It's not here?" And she goes, "No." I'm like, "Wow, that's so interesting."
it's not illegal to drive drunk at all. Like, there's not any limit.
I don't I don't think, I mean, not enough to set up a bar and a car wash business.
Yeah. So drunk driving was made illegal, at least in all 50 states in 1988. So in the 80s, you could drive, you just couldn't drive like under the influence. You could have a beer with you. And I was listening to this comedian a while back who was like, there were people like that were getting interviewed on the news in the 80s who were like, so I can't, this isn't America anymore. I
Right,
can't just
right.
have a beer
That's
in between my lap, like, and take a sip on it while I drive home from a hard day at work.
I'm not gonna mention any names, but when we lived in Atlanta, we had these friends, and whenever we got in a car with them to drive to like a club or an event or something, they always had a half glass of wine in the cup holder.
I think I know these friends.
Yeah.
Um, so they get, you know, the driving scene is so amazing. And like, just, I obviously it's one of those things where it's like he's in front of a screen that's behind him, a moving screen, but it looks really good.
It looks so good. I watched this. I think you watched this on Tubi
Yeah.
also. And we've been watching all of Hitchcock's stuff on 4K, right? It just sucks that North by Northwest wasn't in the little 4K pack. Comes out literally, it comes out
I thought
on
it came,
Tuesday. But what I just wanted to say is that I was worried that it wouldn't look good because I was looking at behind the scene restorations on like the before and after being restored to 4K quality, and I was just like, "Oh man, what is this gonna be? Is this gonna be real hokey?" It's really good.
yeah, reminded me a little bit of like the scene in 101 Dalmatians when Cruella's like chasing the dogs at the end. Like, you know, when he's driving all over and they have views from his face behind him, they have views of like a first person as he's driving around
And
these
they
cars.
match.
Yes, they match really well.
Like there's an intersection where he has to dodge like three cars, one in front of him, one coming into his left, and one coming straight on. And you see this from like the third person perspective of the car, right?
Yep.
And then it hits on the first person's perspective of his rearview mirror, and you see those same three cars like dodge out of the way.
Yep. It's so good. Then he goes past the police car, and when he finally notices the police car chasing him, he brakes, hits into him. Another car hits into the police car. I don't know what the other fucking car was doing, like chasing down a police car. It makes no sense, but um, they take him in, and I love the phone call with his mother. He's like, "No, they didn't give me a chaser." You like shouldn't just tell like, all right, that mom character is gonna be funny. Um,
Well, yeah, funny, but also the worst mom ever.
his story's pretty unbelievable though.
I mean, especially when they get to the house, because
Yeah.
when they get to the house, there's all this cover up already.
I thought there was gonna be no one there. Like, it was gonna be empty, and they were gonna be like, "This place doesn't even exist." But I guess
Would
maybe that would have drawn too much attention.
That would have drawn too much attention, yeah.
So they get there, and it's just a woman who you find out later works for Van Damme. But at the time, she says she's Mrs. Townsend. And then her husband, who is one of his hired killers, is pretending to be the gardener.
I don't know if that's her husband,
She says when she holds him at gunpoint at the end, she's like, Leonard and my husband will be back in a second. And the only other person walking her out there is that guy.
because he said something about a brother?
Yeah, I don't know what to tell you.
Okay,
I
that's
mean,
fine. I accept
unless the pilot getting off the plane is her husband, but I don't think that was it.
it.
Um, so the police take him out, and then the mom makes this comment. She's like, "Just pay the $2." And I was like, "Wait, is that the
Yeah,
charge for drunk driving? Is
yeah.
just $2?" But it's actually apparently just supposed to be a reference to a Depression era vaudeville sketch. So I don't know that that's actually the payment for it.
What was that even building up to? Okay, whatever.
Just pay the $2 is it's like a line from that sketch. So it's just like a reference.
Got
So
it.
it doesn't mean that
Doesn't mean
that would have been
shit.
the charge, yeah. But he
Right.
did drive straight to New York. So they're like, or maybe it was the next day, I don't know. And decides to go straight to the hotel for George Kaplan. And I like the relationship with his mom where he's like, "Hey, go ask for the key and be nice." And she's like, "I'm not gonna do that." And he's like, $10. What? Like what? No, $50. She's like, all right, fine.
You gotta love the mom. Also hate her. His story's unbelievable, but just having like no support from his mom, I don't know.
And then he gets up there, and the maid hasn't seen Kaplan. The guy who took the suit hasn't seen him. He's like, I don't know if anyone's seen this guy. And he answers the phone, and it's the killers, or it's, I guess, Van Damme. And then he calls back the operator. He's like, where did that phone call come from? And she's like, the lobby. And he's like, oh, shit, we got to get out of here. And the scene in the elevator where he like motions to the mom, like, hey, that's them. And she's like, are you really going to kill my son? And then everyone in the elevator starts laughing. And then the way he's like, oh, ladies first. And he's able to run out and get in a cab.
Leave his mom.
Yeah, well, fuck that lady. And then he tells the cabbie, I almost thought the cabbie, like in another movie, the cabbie would turn around and be another henchman. But he's like, I have people chasing me. Can you lose them? And he's like, no problem, pal. And you like never see this guy's face. And then apparently Hitchcock was not allowed to film at the UN. So the scene of him getting out of the cab and walking into the UN building is from a hidden camera across the street, is how they got that shot. And then
What?
if you go back and look closely, there's a random passerby that looks in and is like, fucking Cary Grant, like who's stunned to see Cary Grant walking up the steps.
I noticed that, and I thought it was just a bad extra.
Yeah, no, it's we just got to get the shot.
You realize when he runs out of the UN, that's like a matte painting?
It's so cool looking though.
It's so cool.
And I was also like, why is no one chasing him? All these people. Yeah, so he goes in, meets the real Townsend. Townsend's like, no one lives at that house. It's been shuttered. And then this dude can throw. He reminds me of like
The bowler hat guy from James Bond?
yeah, but I only know the who throws a shoe guy from Austin Powers.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, because whichever Austin Powers Odd Job is in, I have not seen. But I know Odd Job from the GoldenEye game
Yeah, yeah.
because you weren't allowed to play Odd Job. Jaws was too hard because he's too big, and Odd Job was too small, so you couldn't play it. Those were the rules.
Wow.
Unless you sucked, then you got to play Odd Job. I got to play Odd Job a little bit because I was much younger. So
Oh, that's hilarious, dude. Did you? Oh man, I don't even know if they actually did it, but there was a rumor that they would remaster and remake GoldenEye for the Switch.
that'd be pretty sweet because
And
that game looks awful.
it does, but they've already done it, or it's soon to come out. We
I
should
don't know.
look that up.
Yeah, that'd be. I don't know. That'd be a fun one to go back to, but at the same time, like I probably never, I don't know how much time I'd spend on it
Just the
because
games develop so much now.
but it was also like that was more fun as a multiplayer. That was just like a time in our lives. I remember We used to play that so much, and we went on a trip, and one of my brother's friends who was in his grade, we went on our Thanksgiving trip. We always used to go, and my mom didn't go because we went up to our side of the family, and she was just like, "I don't want to deal with that. Like, I'm not going to Alabama." And our friend that always used to come over and play came over the week of Thanksgiving. It was like, "Oh, where's everybody?" They're like, "Oh, they went to Alabama." He's like, "Oh, I wanted to. Can I borrow 007?" So, like, took our N64 so he could play.
That's pretty funny.
He came like during the time we had GoldenEye. He came over like 5 days a week after school.
You should have told him the golden eye broke, and then see if he would still been your friend.
Oh, he was my brother's friend, but yeah, he was still would come over. There was other things. Um, so gets to the train station. A lot of like pretty cool stuff here. He goes up to the guy at the ticket counter, and the guy's like, "Why are you wearing glasses?" He's like, "Because I'm sensitive to questions." And then the guy tries to call the police, and he's already gone.
It is the best and wittiest dialogue written in any of his movies. Like the stuff between Midge and him in Vertigo is so good, and the stuff between Grace Kelly and Stewart in Rear Window is also really good. And the nurse that takes care of him is also just fantastic. But every single piece of dialogue with every single character in this movie is 10 out of 10. He doesn't miss.
Yeah, and I think I didn't. I told you this earlier, and maybe was talking to my wife, but I've never seen a Cary Grant movie, like because I just haven't watched a lot of older movies, and he's just so good. Obviously,
He's much better than that Jimmy Stewart character.
I like Jimmy Stewart too. Jimmy Stewart was definitely different than I thought because only seeing bits and pieces of It's a Wonderful Life, and then seeing him in two Hitchcock movies, it's like he's more well rounded than George Bailey.
I do want to say that when Cary Grant meets Van
Eve.
Damme,
Oh, Van Damme.
they look very similar.
A
They're
little
like two
bit.
sides of the same coin, white guy with dark features, you know?
That's true. They are white guys, both of them. Um, so he gets on the train. Eve immediately lies for him, and then he's like, "Oh, I have 7 parking tickets."
Which should suspect you that she's someone.
Well, no, I know, I wrote down immediately, like I wrote down, "Woman hides him. She's something." Like,
She's something.
so then the conductors I noticed did not check the bathroom. That's where people hide. You got to check the bathrooms. He goes to the eating cart, and she's like, "Oh, I tipped the steward so you could sit here." They openly talk about fucking, just immediately like, "Let's get it on."
Yeah, dude, but the way they do it is such hidden and innuendos and like algorithms and acronyms. It's so good.
Well, apparently her original line, she's like, "I don't talk about sleeping together on an empty stomach," and she had to change it to, the censors made them change it to, "I don't talk about love on an empty stomach." So it was even going to be a little bit more. And I guess at the end of the movie, the train going into the tunnel is sex,
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
and they got that past the censors because they were married at the time, and therefore it was no longer a sin. So,
That's insane.
she knows he's wanted for murder, and she invites him to his car, and she also like warns him about the cops outside, and then lies for him as he's stuck in the stowage. And there's this little part later on, that's that thing he's locked in. She's not supposed to have a key to. Only the guy that comes around and fixes the bed has a key.
Right,
So
right.
at some point, she stole that key, and then we see her slip it back to the guy.
Yeah.
So that's just another like small detail that today and age wouldn't matter. Like I wouldn't have known like, oh, that's how that works, because I don't ride trains all that often. Definitely not like night trains. So
It is kind of funny that the number of beds you're allowed to like unlock within your own room is like sanctioned by the guy, the custodian.
because they don't want to be cleaning extra beds. He's like, I'm not cleaning 2 beds when there's one of you. Don't fucking fuck up the other bed.
I
You know?
guess, yeah.
So she gets out. He's dressed as like a bad guy. And but we do see
A
there's
red hat.
she tells him, you shouldn't go around Chicago. I'll help you. And then she says, I'm a big girl. And he says, in all the right places.
Yeah.
He's talking about her boobies.
Oh, yeah, I get it.
So, and then we see her write a note to Van Damme. And you're like, oh, okay. Well, there it is. She's a bad guy. And the next day when they're leaving, he says she's the smartest girl I've slept with on a train, which you see like affects her. And so it's like, oh, she's like into him now because they had sex last night. And
Did they though?
did they have sex?
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure they did. Yeah.
'Cause she said you're gonna sleep on the floor
That's for the censors. He says you're the smartest girl I slept with on a train. Slept with.
on a train.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, but the way she takes that, it's kind of funny because it's like that it implies either that you've either slept with other women and I'm the smartest, or I'm the smartest because you haven't slept with any other women on the
Right.
train.
Right.
It's not like a very flattering thing to say, but it's just a joke. But she's just like, oh, he really loves me. And then you see the guy come out missing his clothes, and oh, this guy stole his clothes. And then he finds a wad. And I don't know, did Cary Grant leave that on purpose? Because hey, I stole your clothes, so here's a wad of cash to make
I
up
mean,
for it.
probably.
I almost was like, oh, did he accidentally left his money, and that'll come up later, but it does not come up later. And so then they get in the train station. He's changing. He's doing the shaving scene. The cops come in, and she's on the phone talking to a guy on the phone 4 things down, which I didn't even know you could do.
Hmm.
And I guess that's Leonard. Which
It
Leonard is the perfect second in command to a Bond villain.
Yes, you're absolutely right. I just want to fit in there that tiny little razor, and the look that the guy shaving next to him gives him is like gay. He's like, he has the little I don't know what that's supposed to mean because that's like a woman's razor, right?
Yeah. By the way,
Obviously.
this is not going to mean much to you, but so Leonard is played by Martin Landau.
I know Martin Landau.
Personally?
Almost personally.
Well, he died 7 years ago. But
I
how do
know
you
he
know
did.
Martin Landau?
So in film school, we had an editing class and we had to edit one of his movies. And the movie that we edited was actually directed by our teacher. And so we spent a very long time with Martin Landau, from seeing many and hours of raw clips that we had to painstakingly edit into a film.
What do you think he's most known for?
Fishman.
What? No, is that no? So his top 4 on IMDb are Ed Wood, the Crimes and Misdemeanors movie by Woody Allen, North by Northwest, and then Tucker, the Man in His Dream, which I've never heard of. It's interesting what they choose for that. He was on an episode of the show I loved, Studio 60 on the Sunset Strip, when he was older.
You have talked about Studio 60 on the Sunset Strip for fucking ever, to the point where I just need to watch it.
You watch it and you'll cry. You'll grow as a human.
Hmm.
It's great. So he comes out of the bathroom.
Oh, he was in Rounders.
He's the judge that loans him the money.
I've never seen Rounders. I don't know.
Oh, well, spoiler alert! He loans him money. You've never seen Rounders?
I'm trying to look up the movie that I'm talking about here.
That you edited? That your
That
teacher directed?
directed.
Was your teacher a good director? Was it a good movie?
No. No, absolutely not.
Oh shit!
Oh man.
That's why he wanted to edit it. He's like, maybe I could resubmit this in some way.
That's from 1996, and he it was quite a thing.
So she tells him, hey, you got to get on this bus and go out to Route 41 or 42, whichever. Get off there, and he's going to meet you. And even knowing that the plane scene is going to happen, the way the tension is built, where you see one car drive by and then another car drive by and then a car stop and let a guy out, and he goes over and he's like, hey, are you the guy? And he's like, no, I'm not Kaplan. That's not my name. I'm here for the bus. And then he gets on the bus. But before he does, he's like, "Oh man, that plane is dusting crops where there's not any crops." And you're like, "Oh shit." Like the build up to the plane scene is so exceptional.
The fact that you see it turn in the background, he looks at it, and it almost like doesn't move because it's coming straight for him. I was just like, did Tubi freeze? Like, what's happening here? No, but it's so good. Like it builds up the anticipation. He realizes it. And I've seen so many clips and gifs and stuff of him running and dodging the plane, right?
Yeah.
And um the it looks so bad. And when I'm watching it, it looks so fucking good.
It's filmed with just a screen behind him of the plane and him diving into like, you know what I mean? Like, but that's it looked real.
Yeah, but when I look at a GIF, that's the way exactly how it looks. But then when
But
I watch it in the movie, I'm like, he's actually in a crop, and that's actually a plane 10 feet above his head.
yeah. You know what's interesting? So after he dodges it a few times, it dusts the crops and then he hails down that truck. And the plane for some reason decides to run into the truck. Like can't pull up at all. Like what are you doing there?
I just don't think he has time to pull up. He stopped the truck like quite abruptly.
I don't know. So the person flying that plane is licked. He's the other henchman that grabbed him from the place in like from the cafe in the first scene.
Okay, but there's another guy too.
Yeah, the other guy is the husband of the woman. The
No.
husband. There's two bad guys, right? There's Van Damme, and then there's his right hand man Leonard, and then he has two henchmen. There's the one that's kind of a bigger guy, and then there's the one with the hat. When he takes his hat off, he's bald. The guy that takes his hat off and is bald, he's flying the plane because we never see him in the movie again.
Agreed.
Okay. That's all I was saying. That's the guy flying the plane. It doesn't tell you that, but you only know it because he doesn't show up again.
So who's the other guy shooting him from the plane?
I don't know. I don't even
Okay.
know if it's one guy. Maybe
No, it's two because they said that when he crashed into the tanker, there was two fatalities.
Anyway, don't know. So he then goes back to Chicago, and at this point, he doesn't realize that he's been sold out by Eve until he talks to the hotel people, and they're like, "Oh, Kaplan checked out at 7." He's like, "Well, that's not possible. He gave me directions at 9."
So good. So
Yeah.
good. That it's like it's all coming together for him. And then even when he sees her, right? And he's like, he goes up to her room. The way he gets the room number is pretty cool too. But he goes to her room, he sees her. She knows the jig is up. He knows the jig is up. But he still plays it super cool.
Well, and also, the Bond vibes that we've been talking about. He watches the elevator, sees it stops on 4, and then goes to
Yeah.
the guy, "Hey, I'm here to see Eve Kendall. She's on 4 something. I can't remember the exact number." Is very good. The scene where he gets in the hotel room, it reminded me a little bit of Doctor No in that there's this one problematic scene where James Bond goes to this woman. He realizes this woman is a bad guy, and he realizes that this woman's role is to keep him at this spot no matter what. And he takes advantage of that and makes her fuck him.
That's not James Bond. That's just something Sean Connery did.
Yeah, they just kept filming. But I thought that's what was going to happen here, and I was like, ugh,
I like this so much more. No, I like the way
I would hope so.
I like the way they did this in the sense that he's like, I'm gonna take a shower, and he goes in and he runs the water, and she leaves, and he just peeks out. He's like, I'm not taking a shower.
Yep. And the way he gets the notepad and just shades over it to figure out the address. He noted the notepad was there and put it down. I was like, I'm going to get that later. Waits for her to leave. Because he basically makes it seem like I'm not letting you out of my sight, and then lets her sneak away, which is very
Right.
smart. And then he follows them to basically an auction house, and Van Damme is there. And
So it's obvious though, right? It's obvious because he's like, I don't want um George Kaplan to ruin my plans. And I know you know my plans. And therefore you must be George Kaplan because you're going to go to the auction house in which my plans are happening. And what is my plan? Well, I'm betting a significantly high price on this one little fucking figure, huh? And like you're telling me that the FBI can't fucking figure that out?
Just bid on it. Anything he bids on, we're gonna bid on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then also, like, you don't get whatever you auction, you don't get it right away. It keeps at the auction house until it's, like, sent to you, and
I don't know if you pay cash, I'm pretty sure you can just take it right then. There's probably like some check clearing type issues with that. But if you're just
maybe.
$700, I do like. So then Van Damme, first of all, there's this little subtle thing where he pulls his hand off of her because he's like, oh shit, like you're in love with this guy, you fucked this guy, which is very clearly you knew she had to have banged him. And then they leave, and Roger Thornhill is trying to leave, and he sees, oh shit, they're blocking all the exits. He like looks one way, looks the other, and it's so funny. He just starts making random bids,
It's
and then
so good.
he starts making real bids, and they won't accept them. He's like 2,000, 2,500. Like, sir, it's 1,200. He's like, why are my bids not any good? And then fights a dude,
Uh-huh.
and then the
Punches him,
cops
gets arrested.
when the cops get there, he's like, what took you so long? I called you forever ago. And he's like, you called us.
What was so great too is what we didn't mention is that the, um, whole time he's framed for the Ewan murder.
Oh,
And
right.
so his picture is everywhere. He's like the most wanted man in Chicago right now, right? Like Chicago area. And
Well, it happened in New York. He's the most wanted in like the US.
right, at this point he is the most wanted. And what's so funny is that he's like, "Congratulations, officer, you've caught Roger Thornhill, the UN murderer." And they're like, "Okay." And then they're like, "Oh shit, it is him." And then he gets a
Well,
call, and it's like, "Oh, we're gonna deliver you to the airport." He's like, "I don't want to go to the airport. I want to go to the police station where I'm safe."
he gives this line where they're like, "Oh, we're arresting you for drunken disorderly." He's like, "That's chicken feed. You've got the UN killer." And he's like, "Sure we do." And then look at the paper and like, "Oh fuck, we do."
Yeah,
Um, so they get to the airport, and then you just see like the old FBI agent or whoever he works for, just out of breath, running. Oh, thank gosh, I made it. And he says, "Oh, we didn't want to intervene, but we have to. We have to take you to South Dakota." And he's like, "Why should I do that?" And he's like, "Well, maybe it would help to tell you that like Eve is actually the agent, and you put her life in danger because of what you did." Um, and there is this one part where they tell him Kaplan doesn't exist, and then we get dialogue is purposely muffled by the plane. And I at first was like, "Oh, they're muffling. They don't want us to they don't want us to know what's about to happen." But apparently, it is just because it would take forever for them to explain everything to him, and it's either things we already know or it's unimportant details. So they're just like, "Oh, we'll just make it seem like it happened a lot quicker than it possibly could have."
that's
Uh,
interesting. We also haven't gotten to the part where we just kind of leave Roger for a second there, and we're just talking amongst the high FBI agent guys and CIA agent guys, and they finally explain to us like there is no George Kaplan. We
yeah,
have
he doesn't
completely
exist.
made him up, and so far there's two other agents that have died because Van Damme have thought that he's George Kaplan, that they were George Kaplan, and there's no George Kaplan, and you are a ghost. I mean, they even gave the dude dandruff.
Yeah. And before we get to Mount Rushmore, there's this funny line where he's like, "I have two ex-wives, a mother, and several bartenders that depend on me," which is hilarious. And then he gets to Mount Rushmore, and the Asian is still with him, and he's like, "If you weren't so handsome, she wouldn't have fallen for you." And he's like, "Well, same to her." Um, he goes inside, he meets Van Damme, and it's this really like subtle thing where Van Damme's like, "Why did you invite me to these gay surroundings?" And it's like, "Oh, because Van Damme, he doesn't like America and like our national parks." And so he's like, "Oh, this shit's gay," because he's like in bed with the Russians. You know what I mean?
I don't think so. I don't I don't think you are correct, and I think what gave it away was the 10-mile smile across your face.
Well, whatever. Anyway, yeah. Um, and so then he tells
It's so
he's on it.
stupid. It's so dumb. Oh
So
my god.
he tells Van Damme the only way I'll like I know what you're doing. The only way I'm gonna let you go is if you let me have her because I basically want to kill her, throw her in jail. And Van Damme's like, well, how do you know that I've like lost so much faith in her that I'd let that happen? And then she walks over and Van Damme's like, all right, we're gonna leave. And it's like, oh wait, so the deal's not happening. So then
Right, I was confused about that.
he pivots and grabs her and she shoots him. I don't know when this plan was made. She shoots him.
Yeah.
He falls. She gets in a car and drives off. He's dead.
Okay, so hold on, pause. Because if that was the plan from the get-go, right?
Yeah.
Then if Van Damme accepted that proposal and was like, "Come here, bitch. You're his now." She could have still panicked and shot him, right? But him refusing and then him going for her, it's an end result of the it's the same result to whatever equation happened.
Well, actually, they don't want her. They don't want Van Damme to say yes to that because the FBI wants her to go with Van Damme. So if Van Damme says yes to that, the FBI actually doesn't get what they want. Although maybe they're like, oh, well, if he says yes to that, then he's going to kill her anyway. So, we'll save her. But part of this movie is making the point that like a lot of movies do that, like, you know, MI5, Mission Impossible 5 made this point. Like the governments don't care about these fucking spies that they have. Like they're interchangeable, they're replaceable. So like they're putting her in danger, and the fact that she might die, like that's just part of the gig.
So I guess my question and your question is, when did she know to shoot him?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe that's I don't.
Or
We don't.
maybe
We
maybe
don't get
she
that detail.
knew that it was a blank. Well, obviously she knew her gun was blank, right? And then he was like, "Oh, I'm supposed to be shot, so I'm gonna play dead." And then when the old FBI agent goes up to him, you could see that he like breaks like a capsule, and he's like bloody hands,
But
right?
it was a full plan that she was going to pretend to shoot him. I just don't know what they would have done. I guess they just knew Van Damme wasn't going to say yes to that deal.
I guess.
But then they meet up in the woods. Why the fuck does she take the fake gun? Get rid of the fake gun,
I don't know. That's
or
an
get rid
excellent question.
or get rid of the fake bullets if it's a real gun with just blanks. Like, get rid of the evidence. What are you carrying that for?
Such a good part is when Leonard shoots Van Damme and Van Damme smacks him in the face and he's like, I
He
know it
pu-
was blanks, but you ever fucking do that to me again?
he punches him, and the way the camera shows that, it like dead straight on Van Damme and then dead straight on Leonard getting knocked back is really really good. Um, and then he goes up into her room and throws this matchbook at her that says, hey, they know about you, they found, they know about you, come up here, or make sure you don't get on the plane, or whatever it says. He throws it down. Leonard picks it up and just thinks it's matches and throws it on the table. She sees his initials, ROT,
Yeah.
picks it up and reads it, and then she's like, oh, I have to go upstairs and get my earrings. And then she's like, you're gonna fuck this whole thing up. She's like, and he's like, they found the gun, they already know, don't get on the plane. um and then as she's being taken to the plane and they're holding on to her very tight, she hears that this is really really funny. So he is going to start walking downstairs, but the maid sees him in the reflection of the TV, so she pulls the gun on him. As soon as the maid pulls the gun on him, I was like, that looks an awful lot like the fake gun with the blanks in it. And then when he runs out, you hear gunshots. He gets in the car, she gets in the car, and he's like, she had me for 5 minutes before I realized it was your stupid fake gun again.
Oh man. Yeah, and especially when you hear like the shots coming from the house, you're like, "Oh my god, what happened?" But I think what he just probably knocked her down, knocked her
No,
out.
I think he just was like, oh, that's the fake gun, and he ran away. And then that's why she's shooting at him as he does. And then, forever ago, I don't remember where I saw this, but it was like a trivia question. It was like, what movies take place on Mount Rushmore? And one of the answers was North by Northwest. I don't remember what the other one was. It like Richie Rich, or was it the second National Treasure movie?
For Mount Rushmore, it was the second National Treasure movie.
Yeah. Um, so he filmed, I think they filmed parts of it on the Mount Rushmore, but then other things they weren't allowed to do.
Like
Uh,
climb down George Washington's nose.
and then apparently at one point, Hitchcock thought it would be hilarious if he hid in Lincoln's nose. And he even like gave this movie a fake name, the man in Lincoln's nose. And the park rangers were like, no, you can't do that. Like, you absolutely cannot, which I don't understand why he didn't do it, because like he had to build a smaller Mount Rushmore. So like, why did he care that they were so against it? Like,
If it was the fake Lincoln nose, it wouldn't have even like. What was the point of that?
what do you mean? Like, why would they care?
No, like he wanted to hide in the real Lincoln nose.
I guess, yeah, but they wouldn't let him. But he could have just done it if he wanted it for the shot or whatever. I don't know. Anyway, I was watching the movie and I was like, there are 2 minutes left, and they are still on Mount Rushmore
Yeah, yeah,
with the two guys chasing them, and
right.
then he throws one off, and we get the same falling thing from Rear Window.
Which is still pretty good.
It actually looked, I thought, looked better in this one than the other two, Rear Window and Vertigo.
Yeah.
And then the other guy, Leonard, throws her down, and then one of the cops shoots him. And you actually think, oh, like, I actually was like, oh, Eve may die. She may fall
I
off
thought
this.
me too.
And she's like, I can't make it. And then he says, come along, Mrs. Thornhill. And he pulls her up into the bunk of the train. I was like, all right, well, that's a weird ending. Like, for an
It's not
otherwise
only
great movie.
it's not just a weird ending. It's unlike Hitchcock's other works, it's like a too perfect of an ending.
Like, too happy.
Like too happy, too perfect. Do you think like in an alternate way you could look at this is that they died, they both fell off of Mount Rushmore, and like this is their heaven? Like this is like what they're seeing?
I don't think Roger dies. He's pretty locked in.
He's pretty locked in.
He might
Yeah.
lose her, though.
North by Northwest 2.
This is where the movie Cliffhanger got its idea.
I asked my wife, I asked Taylor, "Hey, what do you she watched this with me. I was like, "What do you think this movie is about?" Because I knew it was about a guy who mistaken as a spy. She had absolutely nothing, like knowing nothing about this movie. I'm like, "What do you even think this movie about?" She's like, "Kim Kardashian's son."
Oh my God. You did
Bad,
all that for that joke.
bad joke.
So, a little bit of fun facts. While filming Vertigo, Hitchcock was talking about this movie to James Stewart, and James Stewart got so excited about doing it and was like, I have to be in that. I have to do that movie. And Hitchcock was like, fuck, I already want Cary Grant to play this role. So he waited until James Stewart signed on for Anatomy of a Murder, and then was like, oh, hey, do you want to do this movie? And he's like, I can't. He's like, all right, I guess I'll go with Cary Grant,
Oh my god.
which is a
By the
bit.
way, so another fun thing is that I finally got my my movie that my teacher did. It's called The Joyriders, and it's with Elizabeth Moss, like a really young Elizabeth Moss, and Martin Landau and Chris Christopherson. And if you click on Martin Landau's filmography, it is not on his filmography. Just saying.
But he is on a photo. And it says Elizabeth's first on-screen kiss. A suicidal older man, Gordon Trout, is kidnapped for his car and money by 3 runaway teenagers who live on the streets. The experience together makes them a close-knit family. Bradley Battersby was your teacher?
Yeah.
Let's see. Who else is in this? So, Sean Hodassey. What's he been in?
Been in a couple of things.
He's in Animal Kingdom right now. He was in Alpha Dog and The Faculty.
Southland.
I recognize him.
Yeah.
This is and then Heather McComb. Oh, look at this.
Look at that.
Michael Chieffo. All right then. So the studio wanted, so MGM wanted Gregory Peck, but Hitchcock refused. And then another thing is they told him they wanted this movie to be a 2-hour movie. and then he had his agent like read his contract, and apparently he had like final cut on the movie, so he told MGM to go fuck themselves. That he was just gonna leave it.
Nice. Good.
And then he wanted Eva Marie Saint for the role, and they obviously wanted other people. And he said, once again, go fuck yourself. Although he did want Grace Kelly, but she couldn't do it. And then Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin were also considered for Roger Thornhill.
Interesting picks.
Yeah, it was. I had no idea what this movie was about going into it, except for like, oh, someone was trying to kill him in that crop duster. I've been very surprised. I knew I would like be like, oh, these are amazing movies. But the fact that it's like, oh no, these aren't amazing movies for the time. These are great movies today. Like still
They're
hold
ahead
up
of its
so
time.
they hold up so well. Just like fantastic. This one really, really surprised me how much I liked it. Not surprised, just amazed like how great it was.
Do you think if Rear Window was any more great, it would have just been Disturbia?
I don't know, man. I mean, Jimmy Stewart's good, but is he Shia?
Is he Shia?
But is Sarah Raymer? She's not Grace Kelly, even though she's great too. So who knows? Thanks for listening to another episode of I Finally Watched. This is David.
And this is Alon. And we finally watched North by Northwest.